Huh.
We took part in the African. We didn't get much training, but they wanted to invade, and there were thousands. When we invaded Africa, you could look as far as your eye could see, and there were hundreds of boats and ships bringing troops to shore.
Huh.
And the invasion started in Africa, went across Africa, and I think Rommel was the German general. He was a sly, a very shrewd military man, Rommel, Germans.
Mm-hmm.
But then they went to Africa. Then they crossed. They crossed it and went into Italy, and I think the troops, of course, they needed the navy again to bring them across that little bit of water, and brought them back into Italy. And so they went up through Italy, and then went up all the way up through into Germany and France.
Huh.
But that's how it. But then the war on the then yeah, I took part in the African invasion. I was in the hospital for 8 months, and then I was put on a transport ship hauling supplies. We hauled supplies to Bermuda, Cuba, Trinidad, Iceland, the Panama Canal, because they had troops all over. And so I got to Iceland, got to Trinidad, Bermuda, Cuba, Panama Canal, and then after that I was taken off with a transport ship, and I was put on the USS Iowa. I was put on the USS Iowa about December 27th, 1943. And in 1944, we got on the USS Iowa in New York City, and we went through the Panama Canal. Then we went into the Pacific. Would you want dimension size for the of the ship? The Iowa was a tremendous.
That's okay.
The Iowa was a tremendous.
It was a carrier?
No, a battleship.
Oh, battle. Okay.
Yeah. It had 9 16-inch guns,
Huh.
and this book gives you the statistics, the number of guns that they had.
Yep.
Then they had 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. They were in turrets that double,
Yep.
and they could shoot quite high.
Huh.
But the 16-inch guns could shoot about 24, 25 miles.
Wow.
The projectiles weighed about a ton, and they would shoot them over the horizon. And the reason they used to use them before they invaded
Huh.
the land, they would bombard the coast with these huge projectiles, and then after they bombarded the coastline, then the troops would go in after that,
Yep.
because they thought that they had pretty well taken care of all the
Resistance.
enemy power
Yep.
resistance. And so let's see, where am I now? So then, but I was on this and landed the ship that hauled supplies, and I enjoyed that duty because we would go up to Iceland, come back to New York, and then I had shore duty, so I could go to shore, and usually wherever the servicemen went, they were popular, you know, and they were welcome. Except in Norfolk, Virginia, they welcome the dogs more than they welcome sailors. They used to have a sign on the lawns, dogs and sailors keep off the grass, because Norfolk, Virginia was filled with hundreds and thousands of servicemen. That was a big base, you know.
Yeah.
And, but then when I was on this transfer, we used to go to Bayonne, New Jersey, and then up to these various places. And I enjoyed that. It was interesting to go up to Reykjavik, Iceland. The Reykjavik is, I think it belonged to Norway once upon a time, and much of the construction there has Norwegian architect. The designs of the building were a great deal like those in Norway. But of course, later on, the Germans took it over, and it was controlled by the Germans. But then it became a great, Reykjavik became a great base for our airplanes, our fighter planes. They used to fight, they used to go up to Reykjavik and then cross and go into Germany and stuff like that. But that was a great base there, and very interesting, beautiful country. And the tide was extremely high, and it was like the land of the midnight sun. It wouldn't get dark until about 11 o'clock at night, and then it wouldn't get real dark either. This was in August. We were there. The air was cold, but it would stay daylight until about 11 o'clock at night. Then about 2 o'clock in the morning, it would get
Sun.
dark. And then about 2 o'clock in the morning, it would be daybreak again. And so it was. Now in the wintertime, it's the opposite. It's dark. It's maybe daylight for 3 or 4 hours, and then it's dark the rest of the time. In the wintertime it is. But that's a beautiful country, and so we got to go to Iceland. And then it's interesting, we used to walk down, Iceland was pro-German. And the servicemen would walk down the streets, and there would be girls in the street, you know. And when you hadn't seen a girl in a long time, you were all excited to have seen a girl. And we wanted to see what they looked like and all that. They would cross the street. They didn't want to see us. They didn't like the Americans because we were invading their country. Because they were really pro-German. Iceland was at the time. Then, let's see.
Give him another question.
Did you get to go home after boot camp?
Oh,
Before you shipped out?
sure way. Yeah, I went home. Yeah, we went. Let's see. We were in I think boot camp for about 6 weeks. Then I think they gave you a week or two leave. Of course, they didn't give it, and then you had to go right back into the service. And from there, from boot camp, I went right into training, diesel motors, and I was supposed to have been an engineer. And they had huge diesel engines on these boats. They were water cooled, but there was, and they could pull right up on the beach, but there was a trap that picked up the sand as it came into the water, you know, and you had to make sure that that was clean. You had to watch that because otherwise you didn't want any sand running into the engine block. But the engines were all powerful engines. I forget, huge diesel motors.
Did a lot of.
We were on a 28-footer. Now some of the big ones, those over 50-footer, had two engines on them. And then course, they were run by diesel oil.
Nope. Next question.
Where'd you go to, after you got the leave?
What did I go at my leave?
Yes,
Oh, after my leave or
on
Before
your
you went
leave,
on, when you're.
after boot camp.
On your leave, where'd you go? Just back home?
Oh, I went to Chicago. My girlfriend Frida, my wife, my future wife, lived in Chicago, and then I went to back to home to Ironwood, Michigan, and there's a. What's your next question? I got.
After you were injured, were you treated and or hospitalized?
You already
He already
said that.
answered that one. Next.
It was interesting. When I was injured and in the hospital, lo and behold, who came in there but these newspaper men?
Huh.
On the what is this? They're affiliated with all the big newspapers. There were newspaper men from the big newspapers.
Okay.
They came and interviewed. When I came back from Africa, I was in the hospital in Norfolk, Virginia, and I was had a bed there, and the paperman came and interviewed me. And it was on, I've got some of the papers here,
Huh.
stories.
Mhm.
And Ivan's got some of the stories too.
Huh.
I should just show them. We were interviewed by newspapermen, and I told the newspaperman, I says, now this won't be in the newspaper right away, will it? And they says, no, we won't put it in there for a few days. Lo and behold, the next morning here it was headlines in the paper. And my name was in the headlines.
Uh-oh.
Oliver Gustafson, seaman from Bessemer, Michigan,
Huh.
returns home
Huh.
after being wounded in Africa.
Huh.
And I get newspaper clippings.
Amazing.
And Clifford, my brother Clifford was in Lower Michigan, and he bought the paper. And then somebody from church says, "Do you have a brother named Oliver?" He says, "Yes." He said, "That's my brother."
Huh.
And here he was in the front page.
Did he know, were they the ones that told him you were in the paper? Or did he already know it?
No, he didn't know it. And in Chicago, here my name was the front page of the Chicago Tribune. Every paper in America, my name was in there. My
Really?
article is in there.
Wow.
And I've got articles from the Courier News, or from the Chicago Tribune,
Huh.
and some. I even had some from North Platte. And my name was in there, and so the next morning was Sunday. Next morning was Sunday, and the pastor there, David Johnson from the Lakeview Mission Covenant Church, had charge of the service there. And there he had the paper, and he was reading out of the paper from the pulpit, telling me about me being in the service and being wounded. I should get up if I can get up here. Oh. What was I going to do? Was I going to get down on my knees and pray, or was I going to crawl into my hammock and pull the covers over my head so nobody would see me? So I says, no, I've got to take a stand right away, the first thing. So that first night, I got down on my knees beside my hammock. We didn't have beds in those days. At the training station, we had hammocks. I got down on my bed and I prayed. And I did that every night from that time on. I got down on my knees and prayed every night before I went to bed.
Till you got injured.
And I didn't care who saw me or who looked at me. Because when things got bad and things were dangerous, many of these men came to me and wanted some comfort, some supported cheer. We organized a Bible group. We had a Bible study yeah, almost every ship that I was on, we found Christians, and we started having a Bible study, and we used to meet almost every night for a Bible study, and we memorized Bible verses. We were with the navigators. We used the navigators' memory system, and many of the men memorized many of these verses that the navigators gave us. And so we had a nucleus of men that prayed for us. And I remember one captain we had on the USS Iowa, we had a lieutenant that was a Christian. And he knew the Lord, and he used to testify to the other servicemen and share his testimony. And so one day the captain called him into his office and asked him, what is a Christian? The captain of the ship. He was a 4-star captain of the USS Iowa. He wanted to know what a Christian was. So this man had a chance to share his testimony with him. And I remember being at a turret, standing watch. We used to stand watch. You were on duty, standing watch 4 hours, and you were off 8. You were on 4 and off 8. And this was your routine, 24 hours a day. You were on for 4 hours, and then you were off for 8 hours. And I remember being in this one turret, standing watch, and I had my New Testament. And I was reading my New Testament, and the captain was right above us. And you know who he was looking at? He was looking at me, reading my New Testament. And there were others that did the same thing. They used to take the New Testament with them, and when they weren't standing watch, they would read their New Testament, memorize Bible verses. And we used to take and meet, if you weren't on duty, we used to meet on the bow of the ship almost every night, and we would pray for the ship, for the safety of the ship, pray for our loved ones, pray for our country, and ask God to watch over us. Then we used to memorize Bible verses, and we would quote them to each other. At that time, I memorized the whole book of Ephesians, and you used to be able to quote the whole book of Ephesians.
Wow.
You had a lot of time
Yep.
on your hand. All you were doing is sitting there, and either reading a book or sleeping or whatever. But you were on watch.
Yep.
And when you were on watch, they had a headphone, and everybody was in touch with the central control with your headphones. And if you were in a certain turret, they would call you, and they'd say, "Yep, that's me. What's up?" And they would give you orders as to what you were supposed to do, and if they saw anything in the water, we were to be alerted, but we were in touch with the main guy, but when you weren't wearing the headphones, and you took turns wearing the headphones, you were on duty for about 4 hours. Maybe you wore the headphones half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, and then the next guy would get it. Then he had to be alert. He had to be awake. The other guys could go to sleep if they wanted to. During the day or night, whatever it was, you could do whatever. But he had to be alert, so in case of emergency, they would awaken everybody. And I remember one of the things aboard the ship, they always had the coffee pot on, and we used to go down to the galley and get a big container of coffee, and everybody had cups. So everybody, if you wanted coffee, you could drink all the coffee you wanted, and you could go down to the galley and get coffee. And but while I was on, how much hearing?
Some kids outside, I
The
think.
kids.
Neighbors.
But we had time, and I memorized the whole book of Ephesians, and when we would meet in our prayer meeting, we would quote our Bible verses to each other. And I remember Claire Pike, he's the only one living that at the present time that I know of. And I remember one night, Claire Pike came from Pennsylvania, fine young man. He used to drink like a fish, and but he was a fine young guy. And he used to come to our Bible study. And one night, he asked me. He says, as we were sitting on the bow of the USSR, he says, Oliver, he says, how can I become a Christian? So I led Claire Pike to the Lord. I prayed with him, and he accepted the Lord as his own personal Savior that night. He later on got married, and I hear from him almost every Christmas. But there was Claire Pike, there was Harold Miller. Harold Miller was from Illinois. He came from a Christian background. His wife was a Christian. In fact, his wife's brothers were graduates of Moody. And I kept in touch with Harold for many, many years, but I think he's gone. I think Claire Pike and I must be the only one left that I know of all the ship. I went to a reunion. Frida and I went to a reunion in Peoria, Illinois, back, oh man alive, how long ago was that? We went out to camp that time too. Oh, that must be 20, 25 years ago. That we went to a reunion, USSI reunion, went down to Peoria, Illinois. And I never recognized one person. I never recognized one person. But we'd be you know, we had a lot of common things to talk about.
Yep.
And we had a lot of pictures. And I remember they said that the admiral or the captain of our ship, the USS Iowa, this was years later, he was 96 or 97 something years old, and he wasn't in very good health. And so I wrote him a letter, and here's the captain of the ship. I wrote him a letter and told him how to become a Christian. I didn't know if he was a Christian or not. So I told him, and I sent him gospel tracts and told him how he could become a Christian if he didn't know the Lord. Here's a big shot. When you were just a seaman and these guys were captain, man, you were mud underneath their boots. And but but I like I say, I haven't been in contact with anybody, any of those men for years now. Well, Claire Pike, I hear from him. He's in Bethany Beach, Florida, and I led him to the Lord. I think he's got 3 or 4 children. He says all my children are Christians. Oh, then I let it. Then, lo and behold, I got a letter. I got a letter from a man in Lower Michigan. Oh, this happened. This must be 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, something like that. And I can't think of his name right now. But he says, I've been looking for Oliver Gustafson for a couple of years now and can't find him. And he says, I wrote into the Navy to see if there was where Oliver Gustafson was. And he said, you'd be surprised the number of Oliver Gustafsons that there were in the Navy. And finally he located me, and he sent me a letter, and he says, Oliver, he says, you led me to the Lord one night aboard the ship. And he says, I'm a Christian. This is another guy. And I hardly remember the guy. But he says, I finally got a hold of your name and your address, and he says, you're the one that led me to the Lord. So there were a few that, but we used to memorize Bible verses, and I've got cards to verify, and I probably got some cards, but some of them are, they've seen better days.
They're well used.
I used to carry them all the time with me. So, but now I have trouble
Well, next question. So,
Is this for school? Did they give you the questions?
No,
No.
Oh, you just made them up.
yes.
He
How
said-
did you get to Africa?
I was on, I was going to say the USS Rutledge. No, it wasn't the USS Rutledge. It was another ship. Ariel, USS Ariel. Now, these ships were commercial ships at once upon a time, and they just converted them to, for the purpose of the war,
Huh.
to haul supplies. They mounted a 3-inch anti-aircraft gun. I think they had one gun on the stern on a lot of these ships,
Huh.
but there was no.
it's not
no,
meant for warfare.
no, they weren't made for war.
Huh.
And we hauled supplies back and forth. But I went to Africa on the USS Ariel.
Huh.
And the captain of the ship, he seen what was happening in Africa. He seen that the German submarines came in. They were all the boats were anchored. These big ships were anchored. And the troops would get off of them and go to shore. The soldiers with all their, and then of course they had a lot of equipment and stuff like that. They loaded, unloaded, right up on the beach there. And the USS Ariel was the ship that I crossed the ocean on. And when the captain of the ship seen what was happening, the torpedoes being shot at these craft, he, without orders, fired up his engines and went across the Atlantic by himself. And I'm sure he was reprimanded for
Huh.
it, highly, because he was supposed to stay with the convoy.
Huh.
But he went back to America on his own,
Huh.
without any escort. Otherwise, there were destroyers and cruisers
Yep.
to protect from the submarine.
Huh.
But I'm sure that he got
In trouble for that one.
he
Yeah.
got in big trouble for that, breaking his taking orders.
Yep.
Well, he was a civilian to begin with, and he was converted into a captain,
Huh.
and he was indoctrinated into the military.
Yeah.
But he wasn't used to taking orders.
Huh.
He was the captain of the ship, and whatever, he used to stand up there and yell and swear. He could swear the leg off you. Boy, did he have a temper. Oh, when we used to pull into port sometime, no! He'd stand up on the bridge up there, yelled off. You could hear him all over. And don't do that.
Yep.
And then, of course, whenever you went into shore with the big ships, you always had a tugboat
Huh.
to bring you into shore, bring you into the dock.
Yeah.
You never went in on your own power
Huh.
because your own power, you were just maybe going 2 or 3 miles an hour, but then it took forever to stop.
Yeah.
So they would stop the engines completely, and then the tugboats would push these big ships back right into the dock,
Huh.
because then they could stop.